This is an original story from our collection. A story about power, exposure, and the moment a man realizes control was never the same as protection. He stepped into the wrong room, and everything he buried came back to claim him. The woman who vanished without warning. The woman he erased from his world because loving her was dangerous. She was there, seated beside a hospital bed, holding a newborn with his eyes and his stillness. She disappeared months ago. Now he understood why. Because when you rule from the shadows, love becomes leverage. And the people closest to you become targets. But Jin Tae-hyun had just become a father. And nothing, not his empire, not his enemies, not even the fear that drove her away, would keep him from his child. This is the story of a man who ruled everything. Until the truth found him in a place he could not command. The hospital smelled clean in the way endings always do. Antiseptic. Fluorescent. Too quiet. Jin Tae-hyun despised hospitals. They reduced power to paperwork. Turned kings into patients. Reminded him that blood, once spilled, could not be negotiated back. But his second-in-command had been stabbed during a logistics dispute 3 nights earlier, and loyalty demanded presence. Even in places that stripped men of their armor. 4th floor. West Wing. Room 412. He opened the door without knocking. Men like him never waited. And stopped. The woman by the window did not belong to his life anymore. She had left it deliberately. Cleanly. Without explanation. Liera. Gone like a decision already made. She looked up slowly, exhaustion etched into her face, the kind that lived deeper than sleepless nights. Her hair was pulled back, her posture careful, protective. And in her arms, the world narrowed. A newborn. Wrapped in white. Quiet. Watching him with eyes he had seen reflected in glass his entire life. For a moment, Jin Tae-hyun could not move. Could not breathe. Time fractured into details that refused to align. Era was here. The baby was here. She left months ago. His gaze dropped again, to the tiny nose, the set of the brow, the clenched fist pressed against her chest like it already understood defense. Is that? His voice sounded unfamiliar. Stripped of authority. Era's arms tightened around the child. Her silence answered him before her eyes did. Yes. The word was small. Irreversible. The ground shifted. Jin Tae-hyun, who commanded networks that spanned continents, who settled disputes with a single call, who had built an empire on precision and distance, was a father. And no amount of power had prepared him for that. Jin Tae-hyun stood in the doorway as if the room had sealed itself around him. The door drifted shut behind him with a soft click that sounded final, like a decision made without his consent. He was still holding the folder he'd meant to deliver downstairs, thin paper meaningless now. The wrong floor. The wrong room. A mistake so ordinary it felt impossible that it could tear his life open like this. Liera sat by the window, her body angled protectively around the small bundle in her arms. Winter light slid across the floor and stopped at her feet, as if even the sun knew where not to intrude. She looked different. Not weaker, harder. The softness he remembered had been sharpened by months of vigilance, of being alone with something precious and fragile. When she lifted her head and saw him, her expression didn't change. Only her eyes did. Tae-hyun, she said quietly, like a word she wasn't sure she was allowed to use anymore. He stepped inside before he could stop himself. Then he stopped again, breath caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. The hospital bed behind her was empty. The monitors were silent. The room held its breath. The baby moved. Just a small sound. A shift beneath the blanket. But it pulled his attention with terrifying force. He looked down and felt the ground tilt. Dark eyes. Steady. Observant. The shape of her face was wrong, too familiar. The line of her brow. The way her tiny fist was clenched, as if the world had already taught her to brace. Era followed his gaze and drew the baby closer without thinking, her arm tightening in a reflex older than reason. The gesture cut deeper than any accusation. How long? He asked. His voice sounded calm, which felt like a lie. 3 weeks, Era said. Her throat worked around the words. She was born 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. A lifetime he had missed. First cries. First nights. The beginning of everything. His eyes lifted to Era's. Why didn't you tell me? Silence stretched. The baby made another soft sound, impatient, alive. Era didn't look away. Because you would have made me stay. And you didn't want that? The question was quieter than the one burning behind it. I didn't want her growing up afraid, Era said. Or hidden. Or used as leverage. The truth of it landed hard. He had built an empire on leverage. On knowing where to apply pressure. He swallowed. The baby stirred again, her gaze still fixed on him, as if she recognized something she didn't have words for. His chest tightened in a way he didn't understand. "Her name?" he asked. Era hesitated. Then softly, Sorin. The name settled into him, heavy and permanent. He took a step closer. "May I?" Era studied him the way she always had when something mattered, searching for cracks, for tells, for the man beneath the armor. Whatever she saw made her shoulders loosen by a fraction. Carefully, she shifted forward and placed the baby into his arms. The weight was nothing. The meaning was unbearable. Sorin was warm. Solid. Real. Her fingers brushed the fabric of his suit and curled there, claiming him without ceremony. His breath stuttered. He had held weapons, tools designed to end lives. He had never held anything that made him this afraid to move. Era watched him, fear and something like hope warring in her eyes. "There's no pretending this isn't real," she said quietly. He looked down at his daughter, at the steady rise and fall of her chest, at the calm certainty in her gaze. His world, once defined by distance and control, narrowed to this moment. "I'm not leaving," he said. For the first time since he opened the door, he understood the truth. There was no escape from this room, and he didn't want one. Era didn't take the baby back right away. She watched him hold So-rin as if she were waiting for something to go wrong, for the moment his hands would tighten or his expression would harden into calculation. When nothing happened, when he simply stood there, stunned and careful, she let out a breath she'd been holding for months. "I didn't disappear to punish you," she said at last. Her voice was steady, but it cost her something. Tae-hyun felt it in the way her shoulders remained tense, in the way she kept herself between him and the door even now, as if escape were still an option she might need. "I left because staying would have destroyed us." He didn't look up. "You decided that on your own?" "Yes." She didn't apologize. "Because if I'd told you, you wouldn't have let me go. And you think that would have been wrong?" "I think," Era said carefully, "that you would have tried to protect us the only way you know how. With walls. With men. With threats. And eventually with blood." Her gaze dropped to Sorin. "I couldn't do that to her." The baby shifted, made a small sound, and Tae-hyun adjusted his hold instinctively. The movement felt natural, which unsettled him more than anything else. "You think I don't know what my world is?" he asked quietly. "I think you've survived it," Era said. "That's different." She stood then, slow and deliberate, moving closer until they were almost touching. Up close, he could see the exhaustion beneath her composure. Not just sleepless nights, fears stretched thin over time. The kind that didn't fade with daylight. "I started looking over my shoulder before I even knew I was pregnant," she continued. "Every car that slowed near me. Every unfamiliar face. I kept thinking if they know about me, they'll know about her." His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. "When I found out," she said, "it stopped being about us." He finally looked at her. "It was always about us." Era shook her head gently. "Not anymore. It was about her having a chance to grow up without learning how to be quiet in dangerous rooms." The words landed where his armor was thinnest. "You could have trusted me," he said. "I did," she replied. "That's why I left." Silence filled the room again, thicker this time. Outside, a cart rattled down the hallway. Life moved on, indifferent. "I loved you," Era said, as if it were a fact she'd already made peace with. "That's why it was terrifying. Because loving you meant becoming visible. And visibility is a liability in your world." Sorin's fingers tightened in his sleeve, a tiny anchor. Tae-hyun exhaled slowly, the weight of what Era had carried settling into him. "You didn't give me a choice," he said. "No," Era agreed. "I gave her one." He nodded once, sharp. "And if I hadn't found you?" Era met his eyes without flinching. "Then I would have raised her alone." The certainty in her voice cut deep. "She deserves a father," she added. "But not at the cost of her safety." Tae-hyun looked down at Sorin again. Her eyes were half-lidded now, drifting, trusting the arms that held her. Something in him cracked, not loudly but completely. "You were afraid," he said. "Yes. And you still are." Era didn't answer right away. Then quietly, of losing her. He tightened his hold just enough to feel her warmth. "You won't," he said. Era searched his face, wary, hopeful, unconvinced. "That depends on whether you can change what you bring into her life." The truth hung between them, unmovable. Tae-hyun didn't promise. He only stood there, holding the consequence of every choice he'd ever made, knowing that silence, this time, would not protect him. So-rin slept with her fist still curled in his sleeve. The realization crept in slowly, like something fragile he was afraid to disturb. Jin Tae-hyun hadn't noticed the moment her breathing evened out, the moment the tension in her small body softened. 1 second she had been watching him with those serious eyes, the next she was gone somewhere he could not follow. He didn't move. He stood there, perfectly still, afraid that the slightest shift would wake her and break whatever spell had settled over the room. His arms ached faintly, unused to holding anything this delicate, this consequential. Every instinct he had ever sharpened told him to stay alert, to assess exits, to listen for threats. None of them applied here. Era watched him from a few steps away. She had seen him command rooms full of men twice his size. Had seen him end arguments with a look, with a word spoken so softly it carried more weight than violence. Now he looked uncertain, almost stripped down to something human. "She trusts you," Era said quietly. Tae-hyun swallowed. "She doesn't know me." "She knows enough," Era replied. "She knows when someone is steady." The word struck him harder than she could have intended. Steady. He had built his life on movement, on pressure, on never staying in one place long enough to be cornered. Steadiness had never been part of the equation. So-rin shifted slightly, her cheek pressing more firmly against his chest. The warmth seeped through his suit, through the carefully constructed distance he kept between himself and the world. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. The admission felt dangerous. Unnecessary. True. Era didn't respond right away. She moved closer instead, adjusting the blanket around So-rin with gentle efficiency. "No one does," she said. "You learn because you have to." He looked down at his daughter again, at the soft rise and fall of her chest, at the faint crease between her brows, as if she were already thinking too hard about things she didn't need to understand yet. "I've never been afraid of losing control," he said. "Only of losing leverage." Era met his eyes. "They're not the same. They are in my world." "Then maybe your world is the problem." The words weren't an accusation. They were an observation. That somehow made them worse. He shifted his weight, careful not to jostle So-rin. "Everything I have keeps people at a distance," he said. "That's how I survive." "And what happens when distance is what hurts her?" Era asked. He didn't answer. The truth was settling in, heavy and unavoidable. No amount of money could insulate this. No threat could deter the quiet, irreversible changes happening inside him. Holding So-rin stripped away the armor he wore without thinking. Left him exposed to things he couldn't negotiate with or outmaneuver. Power failed him here. Era reached out and brushed her fingers lightly over So-rin's hair. The gesture was intimate, familiar. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," she said. "I left because I couldn't watch you become a stranger to your own child." Tae-hyun closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, the room looked the same, but he did not. "I don't want to be that man," he said. Era studied him, searching for certainty. "Wanting isn't enough." "I know." So-rin stirred, letting out a small, dissatisfied sound. Tae-hyun instinctively adjusted his hold, rocking her slightly. The movement came naturally, uncalculated. Her breathing steadied again. Era noticed. Something softened in her expression. For the first time in his life, Jin Tae-hyun understood the depth of his vulnerability. Not because someone could take this from him, but because he would never survive it if they did. He looked down at his daughter, at the quiet trust in her sleeping face. "I built my life to never need anyone," he said softly. "And now?" Era waited. "And now I don't know who I am without her." The confession lingered in the air, unguarded and real. And for the first time, Tae-hyun didn't try to take it back. The first warning came quietly. Tae-hyun was still at the hospital when his phone vibrated against his palm, a subtle pulse he almost ignored. Almost. He glanced at the screen out of habit, expecting routine updates, numbers that never surprised him. Han Duk-hyun's name stared back. He stepped away from the window, lowering his voice. "What is it?" A pause. "Too long." "We lost a shipment," Duk-hyun said. "Dockside. Clean hit. No witnesses who want to remember." Tae-hyun's gaze drifted back to the room where Era sat beside the bed. So-rin sleeping between them now, impossibly small against the white sheets. His chest tightened. "Who?" he asked. "Kwon Il-sung's people," Duk-hyun replied. "They didn't take everything. Just enough to send a message." The message was clear enough without explanation. "They know," Tae-hyun said. "Yes," Duk-hyun confirmed. "Or they suspect. Either way, they're testing the ground." Tae-hyun ended the call without another word. He slipped the phone into his pocket and stood there for a moment, listening to the steady rhythm of machines and breathing. Hospitals were quiet in a way that made danger feel louder. Era looked up when he re-entered the room. She didn't ask. She saw it in his face. "Something happened," she said. He nodded once. "They're watching." Her jaw tightened. Already. They don't miss changes, he said. Especially not this kind. She glanced instinctively at So-rin, her hand resting protectively on the baby's chest. The movement was small but loaded with fear. Tae-hyun felt it like a blow. This is what I was afraid of, Era said. This is why I left. And yet, he replied quietly, they would have come eventually. Because of you. Because of me, he agreed. There was no point pretending otherwise. A nurse passed by the open door, oblivious, and Era lowered her voice. What happens now? Tae-hyun didn't answer immediately. His mind was already moving, recalibrating, mapping threats and responses. This was familiar territory. Violence he understood. Strategy he could control. But the room had changed the rules. They're looking for weakness, he said finally. To see if I hesitate. And will you? He met her eyes. No. Era flinched at the certainty in his tone. What does that mean? It means they don't get to touch you, he said. Or her. That sounds like blood, Era said softly. It sounds like protection. She shook her head. In your world, those are the same thing. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated again. This time, Dookyun didn't wait. They hit one of our fronts, he said when Tae-hyun answered. Small fire. No casualties. But it's public. Tae-hyun closed his eyes. A second strike. Faster this time. They're escalating, Era whispered, hearing enough to understand. Yes, Tae-hyun said. They want me to react. And if you do, they'll know they've found the right pressure point. He ended the call and looked at Era. At So-rin. At the fragile calm of the room that no longer felt protected. Love is leverage now, Era said, the words bitter. He didn't deny it. Only if I let them think it weakens me. And does it? She asked. Tae-hyun looked down at his daughter. Her tiny hand flexed in her sleep, untroubled, trusting. The answer rose in him, clear and terrifying. Yes, he said. But it also makes me dangerous. Era searched his face, fear and resolve colliding. What are you going to do? He straightened, the familiar edge returning to his posture. Not armor, but intent. I'm going to remind them, he said quietly, that touching what's mine costs more than they can afford. Outside the room, somewhere beyond the sterile walls, his enemies were already moving. And for the first time, Jin Tae-hyun knew exactly what he was fighting for. The meeting was scheduled for midnight, because daylight invited witnesses. Tae-hyun arrived alone. The warehouse sat at the edge of the river, all rust and shadow, its wide doors thrown open to the cold. Inside, the air hummed with low voices and restrained tension. Men turned as he entered, some curious, some wary, all attentive. Word traveled fast in their world. Faster when something shifted. Kwon Il-sung was already there, seated at the long table, as if it were his by right. He smiled when he saw Tae-hyun, a thin, knowing curve of the mouth. You've been difficult to reach, Kwon said lightly. People were starting to worry. Tae-hyun didn't return the smile. He took his place at the head of the table without asking. The motion alone quieted the room. Worry is unnecessary, he said. His voice carried without effort. Confusion, however, will be corrected. A ripple moved through the men gathered there. Partners, lieutenants, rivals pretending not to be. Kwon leaned back in his chair, studying him. There are rumors, Kwon said. That you've been distracted. Tae-hyun met his gaze steadily. Rumors are for men who don't verify information. Kwon chuckled. Still, ships go missing. Fronts get touched. It makes people wonder if the balance has changed. Tae-hyun rested his hands on the table. The balance is the same. What's changed is tolerance. The room stilled. You took a shipment that wasn't yours, Tae-hyun continued, his eyes never leaving Kwon. You set a fire meant to be seen. That tells me you wanted my attention. Kwon's smile thinned. And you have it. Yes, Tae-hyun agreed. Now you have my answer. He nodded once. The sound echoed louder than it should have. At the far end of the warehouse, the doors slammed shut. A second later, the lights cut out. Voices rose, sharp with surprise. Then emergency lighting flickered on, dim, red, unforgiving. A man screamed. The sound was brief. When the lights returned, the room was silent again. One of Kwon's lieutenants lay on the concrete, blood dark against his shirt. Not dead. Alive enough to understand the message. Tae-hyun hadn't moved. This is what restraint looks like, he said calmly. You wanted a reaction. Consider it measured. Kwon stared at the man on the floor, then back at Tae-hyun. The smile was gone now. You're making things personal. They already are, Tae-hyun replied. You just forgot who taught you that. He stood. No one tried to stop him. Anyone who confuses access with advantage, he said, his voice cutting through the room, will be corrected the same way. Quietly. Publicly. Permanently. He turned and walked out, the doors opening for him as if on command. Outside, the night air hit him hard. Cold. Clean. He inhaled slowly, grounding himself before the weight of it could settle. The phone in his pocket vibrated almost immediately. Era. He hesitated, then answered. It's done. There was a pause on the line. What did it cost? He closed his eyes. The image of the warehouse flickered behind them. The fear. The blood. The certainty. More than before, he said. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. Come back, Era said quietly. Not a command. A request. I will, he replied. And meant it. As he headed for the car, Tae-hyun understood the truth he'd been avoiding. Authority could still bend the world to his will. But every time he used it now, it carved something away from the life he was trying to protect. Power still answered to him. It just demanded a price he could no longer pretend didn't matter. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt earned, not peaceful. Tae-hyun noticed it the moment he stepped inside. No hum of movement. No murmured voices. Just the distant city pressed against glass and steel. The lights were low, deliberately so, as if the space itself was trying not to wake anyone. Era was in the living room, seated on the sofa with So-rin asleep against her chest. She looked up when he entered, and for a brief second relief flickered across her face. Then it faded, replaced by something more guarded. You're back, she said. I said I would be. Yes, Era replied. You always do. The words weren't sharp. That was what made them cut. Tae-hyun moved closer, careful not to disturb the baby. So-rin's breathing was even, her tiny mouth parted slightly in sleep. He reached out instinctively, then stopped himself, his hand hovering uselessly in the air. How long was she crying? He asked. Era's eyes flicked to his hand, then back to his face. Long enough. Guilt settled heavy in his chest. I didn't want to leave. I know, Era said. That doesn't change that you did. He sat across from her, the space between them feeling wider than the room allowed. I handled it, he said. They won't push again. For now, Era replied. They never push all at once. So-rin shifted, letting out a small, unhappy sound. Era adjusted her hold, murmuring softly until the baby settled again. Tae-hyun watched the exchange, the ease of it, the intimacy built in his absence. She was inconsolable, Era said quietly. Not hungry. Not tired. Just unsettled. His jaw tightened. I should have been here. Yes, Era said. Not cruel. Honest. The silence stretched. You think I don't see what you're trying to do, she continued. You leave to protect us, then come back expecting it to balance out. But every time you go, something frays. I don't have a choice, he said. Era looked at him then really looked. You always have a choice. You just don't like the cost of the ones you haven't taken yet. The truth of it landed hard. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can't let them think I'm weak. And I can't let her grow up wondering why her father is always somewhere else, Era replied. So-rin stirred again, her face creasing as if the tension in the room had reached her. Tae-hyun stood quickly, crossing the space between them. Let me, he said. Era hesitated, then slowly shifted the baby into his arms. So-rin fussed briefly, then settled, her head tucked under his chin. Tae-hyun exhaled, relief and fear tangling together. I'm here now, he murmured. Era watched him, arms folded tightly around herself. Being here isn't the same as staying. He had no answer for that. I waited for you, she said softly. Not just tonight. I waited when I left. I waited for you to choose us without needing a threat to force your hand. He looked at her then, really looked. The exhaustion. The disappointment she hadn't let herself voice. The fear she carried quietly. I don't want to lose you, he said. Then don't make me compete with your absence, Era replied. So-rin slept on, unaware of the fracture forming beneath her. Tae-hyun held her close, feeling the fragile weight of what he was already losing, and understanding, too late, that protection meant nothing if it came at the cost of trust. Tae-hyun didn't sleep that night. He lay awake on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, listening to the soft sounds of the apartment settling around him. The city hummed beyond the glass, distant and indifferent. Somewhere down the hall, So-rin breathed in small, steady rhythms. Each one landed like a reminder he couldn't ignore. Control had always been his answer. Control meant survival. Control meant leverage. Control meant never being caught unprepared. But control had also meant distance. Walls. Silence. Absence. He stared at the dark ceiling and understood, with an unsettling clarity, that the danger had never been just the men watching him from the shadows. It was the way he met every threat the same way, by tightening his grip until nothing could move without his permission. Even the people he loved. Morning came quietly. Pale light crept into the room, touching the edges of things without warmth. Tae-hyun rose before Era woke and moved down the hall toward the nursery. He paused in the doorway, unsure for the first time whether he belonged there. So-rin was awake, lying in her crib, staring up at nothing in particular. Her eyes shifted when he entered, tracking him with solemn focus. He stepped closer. "Hey," he murmured. She made a small sound, not quite a cry, not quite content. He reached down and lifted her, settling her against his chest. She fit there easily, as if the space had always been meant for her. His phone vibrated. He didn't look at it. Instead, he sat in the rocking chair Era had chosen, simple, quiet, unremarkable, and let it sway gently. So-rin relaxed almost immediately, her fingers curling into his shirt. The sensation grounded him in a way no threat ever had. Control slipped just a little. The phone vibrated again. He exhaled slowly and checked the screen. Duk-hyun. 3 missed calls. Messages stacking up. Updates he would normally have addressed without hesitation. He didn't open them. For the first time, he let the world wait. Era appeared in the doorway a moment later, hair loose, eyes tired. She stopped when she saw him, surprise flickering across her face. "You didn't answer your phone," she said. "No." She studied him carefully, as if expecting the moment to fracture. "Something wrong?" "Yes," he said. "With me." Era stepped into the room, cautious. "What do you mean?" He looked down at So-rin, at the way she leaned into him without question. "I've been trying to protect you by controlling everything," he said. "Every move, every threat, every outcome. And all I've done is make myself the center of every risk." Era said nothing. "I thought if I held the reins tighter, nothing could reach you," he continued. "But every time I leave, every time I choose control over presence, I prove your fear right." Era's expression softened just slightly. "You're not used to sharing weight." "No," he agreed. "I'm used to carrying it alone." "So what's changed?" He met her eyes. "I am." The words felt strange. Dangerous. Necessary. "I don't trust easily," he said. "Not people. Not systems. Not anything I can't command." "And your daughter?" Era asked quietly. Tae-hyun looked down at So-rin again. "She doesn't need command," he said. "She needs consistency." The admission settled between them, heavy and real. "My control is the problem," he said. "Not my enemies." Era crossed the room and rested a hand lightly on his arm. "Realizing that doesn't fix everything." "I know," he said. "But it tells me where to start." His phone vibrated again, insistent now. He glanced at it once, then set it face down on the table beside the chair. Era noticed. Her breath caught just barely. Tae-hyun held his daughter, feeling the quiet strength of not reacting, not commanding, not retreating. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about what he might lose. He was thinking about what he was finally willing to let go of. The call with Duk-hyun lasted longer than Tae-hyun expected. Not because there was resistance, there wasn't, but because saying the words out loud made them real in a way thought never could. He stood in his study with the balcony doors open, city lights spilling in like a reminder of everything he'd built and everything he was about to loosen his grip on. "I want you to take over day-to-day operations," Tae-hyun said, his voice even. "All of it." Silence stretched across the line. "That's not what you're saying," Duk-hyun replied carefully. "You're not stepping away. You're rearranging." "I'm stepping back," Tae-hyun said. "From visibility. From reaction. From being the first answer to every problem. And if someone tests that, they will," Tae-hyun said. "And they'll learn you speak for me." Another pause. Then quieter. "This changes things." "Yes." Duk-hyun exhaled. "People will see it as weakness." "They already do," Tae-hyun replied. "Let them. I don't need them afraid of me. I need them predictable." A soft laugh. Not mocking. Understanding. "You trained me for this." "I trained you to think," Tae-hyun said. "Use that." When the call ended, he remained still for a moment, phone heavy in his hand. Authority didn't vanish when you loosened your grip. It shifted. But sacrifice was never clean. Era was in the kitchen when he joined her, So-rin resting in a sling against her chest. She looked up immediately, reading the change in his posture. "You talked to him," she said. "Yes." "And?" He leaned against the counter, the words coming slower now. "I delegated. Rebuilt the structure. I won't be the face they push against anymore." Era searched his expression, wary. "What does that cost?" He thought of the warehouse. Of fear-bending rooms. of power answering when called. Respect, he said. Control. Some reach. And you're okay with that? No, he said honestly. But I'm choosing it. So-rin stirred, her hand slipping free of the fabric to grasp at nothing. Tae-hyun reached out and let her catch his finger. The contact steadied him. People won't stop coming for you, Era said quietly. I know, he replied. But they won't always find me. And if they do? He met her eyes. Then I won't be alone. Era's breath caught. Not relief. Recognition. I'm not asking you to trust blindly, he continued. Or to forget what I am. I'm asking you to let me change what I bring home. She looked down at So-rin, at the small, fragile proof of everything at stake. Change takes time. I'm not asking for time, Tae-hyun said. I'm showing you direction. That night, the apartment felt different. Less tense. Less sharp around the edges. Tae-hyun sat on the floor of the nursery while Era fed So-rin, watching the quiet choreography of care. He'd once ruled rooms with a glance. Now he learned the cadence of breathing, the timing of comfort. His phone buzzed once. Dukhyun, it's done. Word is spreading. Tae-hyun turned the screen dark without replying. Are you sure? Era asked softly, not looking at him. No, he said. But I'm committed. She glanced at him then, really looked, as if seeing not the man he'd been but the one standing in front of her now. That might be enough, she said. He sat there, listening to his daughter's quiet sounds, understanding the truth of what he'd given up. Power would always answer if he called. But tonight he let it ring unanswered. Sacrifice, he realized, wasn't about loss. It was about choosing what mattered more. Morning light filled the apartment slowly, easing its way past the curtains and settling into corners that had once been left deliberately dark. Tae-hyun woke to the sound of breathing that wasn't his own. For a moment, instinct kicked in, counting, assessing, listening. Then he realized what he was hearing. The soft, uneven rhythm of So-rin asleep between him and Era, her small body radiating warmth, her hand curled against the fabric of his shirt as if it belonged there. He didn't move. Era stirred first, blinking awake, her eyes going immediately to their daughter. Relief softened her expression when she saw Tae-hyun still there, still holding her. You didn't leave, she murmured. No, he said quietly. I wasn't planning to. They lay there in the hush of early morning, the city distant and irrelevant. This ordinary stillness, felt more powerful than any room he'd ever commanded. Later, they went outside. It wasn't dramatic. No convoy. No warnings. Just the three of them walking into a small park a few blocks away. So-rin bundled carefully against Era's chest. Tae-hyun stayed close, not out of fear, but habit slowly relearning itself. The world didn't end. No one stared. No one followed. Children laughed nearby. A dog strained at its leash. A woman jogged past with headphones in, oblivious to who he was or what he'd once represented. Era spread a blanket beneath a tree, settling So-rin in the shade. Tae-hyun knelt beside them, watching his daughter blink up at leaves moving gently overhead. She kicked once, then again, fascinated. This is what I wanted, Era said softly. He nodded. I didn't know how to get here. And now? Now I do, he replied. It wasn't that the danger was gone. Tae-hyun knew better than that. The world he'd built didn't dissolve overnight. There were still calls he would take, decisions he would make, lines he could never fully step away from. But power no longer defined him. Presence did. That afternoon, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Dukhyun. He glanced at it once, then silenced it. Whatever it was could wait an hour. Maybe two. Era noticed. She didn't comment. She simply reached for his hand, their fingers fitting together easily, without thought. So-rin let out a small sound, somewhere between a complaint and a laugh. Tae-hyun leaned closer, smiling despite himself. Looks like she's decided, Era said. About what? Who you are. He watched his daughter, her eyes bright and curious, unburdened by the weight he'd carried for so long. Then I'll try to live up to it. That evening, as the sun dipped and the city lights began to flicker on, Tae-hyun stood on the balcony holding So-rin while Era rested behind him. He looked out at the skyline, not as territory, not as something to control, but as a place he now shared. I spent years making sure no one could see my life, he said quietly. And now? Era asked. And now, he replied, pressing a kiss to his daughter's forehead. I don't want it hidden. So-rin shifted, settling against him, trusting without reservation. Tae-hyun felt the truth settle deep in his chest. Power had once been his armor. Family was his foundation. And for the first time, Jin Tae-hyun knew exactly which one would hold.